Jaw-dropping discoveries made in the ice. An unfortunate dive. These birds were just trying to find some food, but after taking a sharp dive beneath the water, they immediately froze. The water was so cold that it only took a few seconds for the birds to become entirely frozen. These frozen kingfishers were discovered in Wiesendorf, northern Bavaria. Winter is certainly not an ideal time for these little birds to take a swim. Frozen lighthouse. Sometimes the cold can get so bad that it ends up freezing the architecture around it. This is quite a common occurrence in Michigan, and sadly this lighthouse succumbed to the icy cold weather. The lighthouse was presumably unmanned, and its spiral staircase had been completely frozen. If a living creature had to bear this cold, then there's no saying it would survive. The mysterious-looking lighthouse certainly had to deal with some rather frigid temperatures. Ötzi Man. The Ötzi Man has been regarded as one of the most popular human beings to have ever been found in the snow. Approximately 5,300 years old, the well-preserved body had been found in the Alps between Italy and Austria. One exceptionally fascinating detail about this man is that he happens to be the genetic ancestor of several people in the nearby Austrian area. However, the Ötzi Man did pick up several illnesses like worn joints, Lyme disease, gallstones, hardened arteries and much more. The cause of his demise seemed to be a hard knock to the skull. Birch basket. A very well-preserved birch basket has also been discovered by scientists in these ice patches. It may not be very mysterious, but it does reveal a little history about the people who made the basket and what it was used for. It had been folded into wooden panels using no plant material. 5 crates of 100-year-old McKinley whiskey. 5 crates with 11 bottles of whiskey were discovered in Antarctica in 2006 in the hut of Ernest Shackleton, an explorer. They were all wrapped in straw and paper to ensure the bottles were thoroughly protected. It must have certainly been a rough trip for Shackleton back in 1907 to Antarctica. Due to the extremely cold conditions, the liquid was frozen, but once it was brought to room temperature, the whiskey was back to normal. Since it was historically significant, the precious findings were naturally stored safely. A sample was given to White and Mackay, the Scottish distiller. Scientists from New Zealand later examined the bottles and discovered that the alcohol content in the whiskey was still intact. Mammoth brains. A seemingly weird thing found by scientists in ice is the brains of a woolly mammoth. This mammoth happened to be found in derelict permafrost just off the Laptev Sea coast. This was also the only preserved species of mammoth that had been found with its brain intact. The specimen was approximately 39,000 years old, which makes this discovery even more spectacular. The mammoth also happened to be a child and was approximately 9 years old. Plains on ice. While it may not be ancient, it's certainly surprising. Usually presumed lost, things like this have a fascinating way of being found again. In 1952, this military plane, which was bound from Anchorage, Alaska, ended up crashing into a glacier nearby. The incident took the lives of 11 crew members and 41 passengers. But, the conditions were so unsafe that it was impossible to retrieve any of the wreckage. It took 50 more years after the glacier melted enough for a salvage mission to begin. A surgeon's 100-year-old notebook. This old book reportedly belonged to Robert Scott and was from his last expedition in Antarctica. George Levick, the original owner, was a photographer and surgeon who had accompanied Scott during this expedition from 1910 to 1913 to Antarctica. The book had been frozen in ice for nearly 100 years, resulting in the pages getting stuck together. The bindings of the book had also dissolved. Despite this, whatever material was readable, it was rather exciting. There were various descriptions of photos that George had taken at Cape Adare in 1911. The book had been discovered by another Scott Camp back in January 2013. As the summer snow had melted, the base of Cape Evans was exposed, which led to the discovery of the book. Woolly rhino. The specimen of the woolly rhino had been found unbelievably well preserved that it even came with fur covering several parts of its body that hadn't been gnawed on. The rhino was approximately 18 months old and was discovered in Sakha, Russia. The last of this species was said to have gone extinct nearly 10,000 years ago.